Well, now that I've covered what I need to about Conquest, it's time for us to look at the other side of the spectrum and head into Birthright. So naturally the first thing to talk about is, of course, the characters. Once again, Fates, you've done a very good job with the characters, since the characters from Hoshido are strong additions to the Fire Emblem series. Each of them are interesting, unique, very colourful and have lots of personality, as well as being very viable units on the battlefield, and once again helping to show the sense of moral grey that Fire Emblem is known for. But do they hold up to the characters of Nohr? No. In fact, most of them don't even come close. But that doesn't stop them from being good, if not great characters. And today, I'm going to be counting down which of them are my 10 favourite. Now, just like with the Nohr characters, one, as always, this is just my opinion, and like with every Fire Emblem characters list I've done, use on the battlefield plays a big part when judging each character, but what matters most to me is the character themselves and their support, so keep that in mind throughout this countdown. 2 is that I'm looking at the characters that are exclusive to the Birthright storyline and judging them in terms of Birthright alone, rather than how they are in Conquest and Revelations, so characters like Corrin, Evora, Kaze and Felicia won't be on here. 3, I won't be including any child units because they're going to get their own countdown at some point. And finally, I'm not looking at NPCs or bosses, just the characters you use in Birthright and Birthright alone. Also, this goes without saying, but no amiibo characters. And with all that cleared up, it's time for us to take a stand, defend our honour and keep the peace. For the future, for my subscribers, for the glory of Hoshino! What's interesting about Fate, and I think is a really cool attention to detail, is that based on whether you play as Nohr or Hoshido, you will get classes exclusive to that particular kingdom. For example, Hoshido have ninjas, Pegasus Knights and swordmasters, whereas Nohr have knights, paladins and wyvern riders. What's interesting about this is that despite certain classes being exclusive for each game in terms of the base class, you get a Nohr class in Birthright in the form of a wyvern rider who fights to free her city from Nohr's oppression. Good for you, Scarlet! Man, even in a list about best Birthright characters, I still can't escape from Nohr. Yes, starting off this countdown we have the Scarlet Wyvern Knight, Scarlet, who technically isn't from Hoshido, but she joins the team in the middle of the game to fight against Nohr, so she gets a free pass on this one. Now Scarlet should, in all honesty, not be on this list since she's a semi-late game unit, which I'm overall not a fan of, plus the fact that for Birthright, I kinda wanted to focus on the characters who were tied to Hoshido. But much like Perry, for some strange reason I couldn't help but really like Scarlet, and after being stuck with 2 Pegasus Knights, I could do with a powerhouse flying unit. Scarlet first appears in Chapter 13 of Birthright, as she is leading the rebellion in Sheva against the Nohrian army. Funny thing is that Scarlet does the same thing in Conquest, only that because the rebellion is a failure, things don't exactly end well for Scarlet, since Scarlet is no longer just in her name. Ugh. Thanks to the efforts of Corrin and Ryoma, the rebellion is successful and she joins the team in order to free the rest of the world from Nohr. Scarlet, despite being a resistance fighter, is a very upbeat and lively person, as well as someone who fights for her beliefs and what she feels is right. Scarlet has this childlike innocence and optimism about her despite all that's going on, and this is shown in her supports with Corrin, as she likes to decorate her weapons and armour in order to give them more personality. I get the feeling Scarlet looks more like this rather than this on the battlefield. Gameplay-wise, Scarlet, despite coming in around the middle of the game, is a very potent unit on the battlefield, and can be one of the stronger units on your team due to her being a Wyvern Lord. Scarlet has the typical growth rates of a Wyvern Lord, excelling in strength, skill and speed, but lacking in resistance and magic, making her one of the more potent physical units in Birthright. Scarlet is actually someone who can really benefit your team despite not being an outstanding unit, since both Hinoka and Tsubaki lack the punch needed to take down a lot more bulkier enemies due to them being Pegasus Knights, so having Scarlet on your team could help make up for that and give you more diversity with your units as a whole. Overall, Scarlet, despite being not a proper Hoshidian, is still worthy to fight alongside Corrin and the gang, as she is a very solid unit and can help to cover areas the other Hoshido units lack in, not to mention being one of the better pre-promoted Fire Emblem units. Granted, I wish she had more supports outside of just Corrin. I mean, come on, Scarlet and Ryoma could have easily supported together, and she isn't exactly going to win Wyvern Unit of the Year considering she's going up against Cormag, Milady, Camilla and Jill, but Scarlet can still hold her own as a unit and as a character, so props to you for making it for number 10, Scarlet. Man, now I really feel bad about what happens in Conquest. One common character trope seen in a lot of stories is the polar opposite brothers. You all know this cliche, don't you? You've got the one brother who's as good as gold and an all-around lovely guy, and then there's the other brother who, for the lack of a better term, is a bit of an ass. Fire Emblem is no stranger to this trope since you've got characters like Oscar, who's a sweetheart, and Boyd, who's an idiot. And Fates continues this tradition, as Kaze is a ninja with a heart of gold and loved by all, and then there's his brother Saizo, who's a bit of a prick. Admittedly not the nicest way to talk about one of the better Birthright characters, but hey, I'm not going to ignore the fact that Saizo can be an asshole sometimes. Most of the time. Okay, pretty much all the time, but I still really like Saizo despite this, as he was a pretty damn good unit on the battlefield, as well as being one unit who I felt had some of the strongest supports in Fates as a whole. Saizo is the brother of Kaze and one of Ryoma's retainers, who first appears in Chapter 7 of Birthright, and appears very often during the first couple of chapters in the game as the gang are on the hunt for Ryoma. Saizo can be best described as the polar opposite of Kaze, in the sense that Saizo is blunt, cold, rude, hot-blooded and has a fiery temper. He never really feels the need to make friends and very often puts his duties above everything else. Not helping this is that Saizo has a hard time trusting anyone, especially if they're from Nohr, as he is often the most rude to them, especially poor Felicia. But his supports help delve into his attitude and backstory. His supports with Kaze go into how the death of their father affected him, and his supports with Kagero expand upon his relationship with her, and how though they can't work together as a couple because of his attitude, they can still acknowledge and respect each other as friends and allies. Gameplay wise, Saizo is one of the 3 ninjas in Birthright, and personally I find him to be the weakest of the 3, but still a very good unit in his own right. Saizo has very good growth rates in all his stats, in particular skill, which has a whopping 80% growth rate. Man, this guy could hit Lin while blindfolded. And the rest of his stats are well balanced aside from resistance. This makes Saizo a very reliable unit that can run both offensively and defensively, as well as being useful for support, making him one of the best units early on in the game and can still hold his own to the end. Personally, I think both Kaze and Kagero are overall better, as Kaze has the speed and Kagero has the strength, along with both of them having much better resistance than Saizo, but is still a strong unit and will be very helpful in the first couple of chapters. Having one brother who's nice and the other who's naughty is nothing new, and Fire Emblem continues this tradition with Saizo being the naughty brother. Despite being one of the more crude Fire Emblem characters, his supports make him one of the most interesting characters in Birthright, and as a unit he's very solid that caters to just about any playstyle. While outclassed by the other 2 ninjas, I still like Saizo. I just wish he would be a little more considerate to the other characters. I mean, come on, what you said to Felicia was just so mean, you ass! Well, now that we're at number 8, it's time to talk about the Hoshido royal family. While not as good as the Nohr royal family, the Hoshido royals are still a strong bunch of characters, and like Nohr, they really feel like a family, and I enjoyed my time with them. So to begin with, we're going to start with the redhead queen of the skies, Princess Hinoka. I bet this is going to make quite a few people scratch their heads in confusion. I mean, Hinoka is one of the Hoshido royals, which should automatically land her rather high on this list, as well as being a Pegasus Knight, which is still my second favourite class in the Fire Emblem series, yet she's only at number 8? Well, not to put Hinoka down or anything, I do like her. I just think the next 7 characters on this list are overall stronger, but at the very least, let's see what Hinoka has to offer. Hinoka is the princess of Hoshido, and is the second eldest of the Hoshido royal family. Hinoka initially appears in Chapter 4, but doesn't become a member of the team until Chapter 8. Despite being a princess, Hinoka acts nothing like your typical princess. As Hinoka is serious, fierce, reckless and brash, she acts much more like a soldier, as she's much more focused on protecting people and fighting for her country. Despite being focused with fighting, Hinoka does have a very soft side, and is very compassionate about the life of others much more than her own. Hinoka, like Saizo, also has a lot of very strong supports that help to both flesh out her backstory and motivations for becoming a Pegasus Knight, like with Korin, as well as just her interacting with other characters and being more true to herself through them, like with Tsubaki and Setsuna. Gameplay wise, Hinoka is an overall solid unit that should be with you in just about every chapter, though I'll be the first to admit, she's not outstanding as far as Pegasus Knights go, and personally she's rather low on the radar for me. Hinoka stat wise is pretty good across the board, with her having very good speed, luck and resistance, so naturally she shits on mages, and Hinoka from experience landed criticals like crazy. What was interesting about Hinoka when I played Birthright was that unlike most Pegasus Knights, Hinoka was actually rather tanky against physical units, especially with the guard Naginata equipped. Which is odd considering she only has a 35% defense growth rate, but for some reason she could tank rather well, which made her great against sword units. However, Hinoka for me also had rather poor strength and couldn't really do significant damage to physical units, so she could take the hit but not dish them back out. Hinoka to me is very much like Saizo, a unit who is overall good on the battlefield and has very strong support. While not one of my favourite Birthright characters, I still like Hinoka and find her to be one of the more complex Birthright characters thanks to her support. And while she is a good unit and surprisingly tanky for a Pegasus Knight, I don't find her to be one of the top ranking Pegasus Knights, but much like the situation with Scarlet, it's not easy to compete against the likes of Fiora, Vanessa, Marcia and Sumiya, even if you're a noble. Regardless, I still like Hinoka and she'll always be welcome on my team, because I swear no one lands 4% critical hits like you do, baby. One thing I've noticed about characters in Fates in relation to their classes is that they often embody the very best and worst aspects of that class in their stats and growth rates. I mentioned this both with Charlotte and Nyx, as they embodied the best and worst aspects of both the Warrior and the Dark Mage class, and in the case of Birthright, this one unit embodied both the best and worst aspects of being a Swordmaster, and this unit goes by the name of Hana. Whether it be Conquest or Birthright, it seems that either side is going to have those units who embody the best and worst aspects of their respective classes, with Hana being the Birthright representative, since she has all the aspects that make a Swordmaster great, but she also has all the aspects that make a Swordmaster bad, though to be fair, being a Swordmaster is mostly a positive thing. Not only that, but Hana herself, while not being one of the most complex characters, was a very colourful and entertaining character that was just bursting with personality. Hana is one of Sakura's retainers and childhood friend, naturally, and first appears in Chapter 7 of the game. Hana has a very tomboy-like personality and is a lot more active and upbeat than most characters, but being Sakura's retainer, she is very focused on her training and dedicates herself to being the best Swordmaster ever. Despite this, she is rather humble about her skills and isn't full of herself, though she has a very low sense of self-restraint sometimes and can get carried away very easily. Hana's supports, while not too deep, are a lot of fun to read, as her supports with Setsuna have those two figuring out how to improve themselves as retainers, as well as helping to work to their strengths and cover their weaknesses, as well as her other supports that expand upon her backstory, as her father served King Sumeragi, and now she wants to follow in his footsteps. Gameplay wise, like I said, Hana exemplifies the best and worst aspects of the Swordmaster class, since she has high levels of strength, speed and skill, but her defense, HP and luck are rather poor. Since Hana is one of the first units you get in the game, she can be one of your very best early game units and still be great towards the end. But the thing you have to keep in mind with Hana is that you have to play to her strengths when using her and make sure you don't let people exploit her weaknesses. Since if you fight an enemy Hana has an advantage against, she will destroy them. But if she goes up an enemy that can counter her, she will die. Not might die, will die. Fates has a knack for having characters that have the best and worst aspects of their classes reflected in their stats and skills. And Hana is another one of those characters, being a Swordmaster that when the situation favours her, is the best unit on the battlefield. But when the tables have turned and the enemy has the upper hand, she becomes the worst unit on the battlefield. Even with this very 50-50 use, Hana is still a very fun and likeable character, with good supports and is an all-around strong addition to the Fire Emblem series. She may not be great all the time, but when things go her way, Hana has no equal. Pegasus Nights are a staple of the Fire Emblem series, and have been around since the very beginning. But throughout the entire series, Pegasus Nights were always a female-only class. What? Were Pegasus Nights considered too girly for male classes, so they just stuck to Wyverns? Who knows. But thankfully, Fates decided that Pegasus Nights needed gender equality. As for number 6 on this list, we have the first male Pegasus Knight in the Fire Emblem series, Tsubaki. You'd think having a male Pegasus Knight wouldn't have taken this long to come around, but hey, better late than never. Anyway, Tsubaki, aside from obviously being the first male Pegasus Knight, is also a very solid and well-rounded Pegasus Knight, being better than Hinoka in my opinion, as well as being a strong character in his own right, not to mention being remarkably similar to a certain other Pegasus Knight considering his personality. Tsubaki, like Hana, is one of Sakura's retainers and first appears in Chapter 7 of Birthright. Tsubaki is best described as a perfectionist, as he is often viewed by others to be perfect to what he does and a beacon of what all soldiers in the army should be, much like Cordelia from Fire Emblem Awakening. Tsubaki knows this and constantly works his hardest to hold up his reputation, but as a result, whenever he screws up, he takes his failure to the extreme and wallows in his self-pity. Man, what a drama queen. But at the end of the day, he has a good heart. He really is like Cordelia. I wouldn't be surprised that if he had a daughter, she'd be like Cordelia in some regard, but not a complete carbon copy. I mean, Fates wouldn't do that to any of their characters, now would they? Bullshit! Tsubaki has some strong supports that often bring up his past experiences with other characters, and I love his support with Mozu, where he learns about more effective ways of handling certain situations and learning new things from her to better improve himself. Gameplay wise, Tsubaki is an overall very solid Pegasus Knight, though like Hinoka he is somewhat unconventional because of certain stats and growth rates. Tsubaki has good growth in all stats, in particular skill, though his speed and resistance are rather low even for a Pegasus Knight, but overall he's a very well-rounded unit that you can rely on. I find that Tsubaki, because of his low speed, isn't too good starting out, but as the game goes on and you promote him, he can become much more viable and a unit you can take to just about any chapter to use to your advantage. In the end, while it took much longer than necessary for the Fire Emblem series to get a male Pegasus Knight, at least we did get one, and a rather good one in the form of Tsubaki, who is overall a strong character and a strong unit on the battlefield. He may not be the best, but he's got it where it counts. Retainers in Fire Emblem, while having their own unique personalities, are all sharp-minded individuals who are ready to fight at a moment's notice and do their best to help those they serve, not hinder them. I say this because despite being a retainer, Setsuna doesn't fit that description. Man, there are many Fire Emblem characters that don't act the way they should despite their roles in the army, which makes you wonder how they stay alive all this time. I mean, Makalov is a drunken idiot who I'm surprised Marcia hasn't beaten the shit out of yet. Florina is so timid you could probably sneeze and she'd get knocked over. And in this case, Setsuna is so absent-minded and out of it, you'll be surprised that she can get the job done at all, let alone be a retainer. But it's this level of absent-mindedness that makes her such a funny and downright lovable character. I can't help but crack a smile at every time she gets caught in a trap, which is very often, mind you. Setsuna first appears in Chapter 8 of Birthright, and is one of Hinoka's retainers alongside Azuma. Now, despite being a retainer, Setsuna isn't sharp or focused or intimidating, or one of those super duper loyal types. No, Setsuna is extremely lazy and absent-minded, to the point in which she relies on Hinoka to help her more than Hinoka relies on her, which being a retainer is incredibly backwards. Now, while this may seem like a bad thing, surprisingly it's one of the best things about Setsuna, as she is just so much fun to listen to due to the way she acts so nonchalantly about everything, as well as not understanding sarcasm and mistaking insults for compliments. Not to mention her laid-back attitude allows her to focus on what she does best, and when she needs to, she can be extremely focused and disciplined. Her supports helped emphasize this, as some of them are just so much fun to experience because of her absent-mindedness, as well as how people come to learn just how capable Setsuna really is despite what she may seem at a first glance. Gameplay-wise, Setsuna was a very good archer, and one of the stronger ones in the Fire Emblem series. I mean, yeah, she's not exactly Naomi, Astrid, and the almighty lord himself Shinon quality, but she can certainly hold her own. Setsuna has overall pretty decent stats across the board, despite lacking in defense and resistance, but she has very high speed stats and growth rates, allowing her to double most enemies early on in the game. Admittedly, it's easy to overlook Setsuna because of Takumi, but I feel Setsuna can be a very potent unit, especially when promoted, as I made her a Kinshi Knight, making her levels of speed ridiculous, as well as helping to boost her low resistance, along with her incredibly high movement levels, making her a fantastic support unit, as well as great for hit and run tactics and picking off enemies. While Setsuna's role as a retainer to Princess Hinoka might be questionable at best due to her attitude, Setsuna is more than capable of pulling through when need be, as she is a very good unit on the battlefield both early game and until the very end, as well as being just such a fun and enjoyable character to listen to and see how she interacts with others, not to mention the amount of time she gets caught in traps. I get the feeling that if Setsuna was a Pokemon, she'd be the easiest one to catch because of her relationship with being caught in traps. In fact, that gives me an idea. I must say I missed you so much. I mean, you're one of my favourite units in Fire Emblem 9 and 10, and I thought I would never be able to see you again since that class was exclusive to that game. Thankfully, Fates brought your class back with you alongside it, and I'm so glad you came back, my dear sweet Nephany. News just in, the character was named incorrectly, and in actuality the spear fighter in question is Evora, not Nephany. Could have fooled me. Man, talk about a severe case of mistaken identity. Regardless of the rather blatant screw-up, coming in at number 4 we have the spear fighter Evora, a character who reminded me so much of Nephany because of her class and overall performance on the battlefield. And also like Nephany, she's a strong character in her own right who has a nice balance of a fun and quirky personality mixed in with emotional and rather in-depth supports. Man, she really is like Nephany. And I've just been informed not to make another comparison to Nephany or I'm going to be kicked out of the studio. Well, I can't exactly argue with that. Evora first appears in Chapter 9 of Birthright and is one of Takumi's retainers alongside Hinata. Now most of the characters in Hoshido have a severe dislike for Nohr, and Evora is probably the one who hates them the most due to the fact that it was Nohrians that killed her parents when she was young, and as such she doesn't trust other members of the Nohrian army, but has enough sense to know that not all of Nohr is evil. Evora also has the talent for fashion, as she knows all about the latest fashion trends and often tries to help bring out the best of people by helping them pick out the right outfits, though sometimes she can get rather obsessive. Evora has strong supports that often combine both her love for fashion and tragic backstory into one, such is the case with her supports with Takumi, and overall Evora is a character that has all the bases covered, but she also has enough uniqueness to make her stand on her own 2 feet, much like Mina's certain other halberdier who shall not be named at this time. Gameplay wise, Evora was great in every sense of the word, being one of the best physical units on the team and one unit who could always get the job done. Being a spear fighter, which is the face equivalent to the halberdier, Evora has balanced stats and growth rates across the board, only lacking in magic and resistance. This made Evora a very reliable unit and someone who could run both offensively and defensively, as well as support allies when need be. And because she appeared early on in the game, she could be trained up more than most of the other units in the game. Man, this is just like that one character you get in part 2 of Radiant Dawn. I also found Evora to be a character that seriously benefited from the more exotic weapons, as the guard Naginata made her a literal tank, and the dual Naginata and sword catcher made her very effective against particular enemies. I am very glad Fates brought back the soldier class in the form of the spear fighter, and Evora was a fantastic character to represent that class, being one of the best units on the battlefield and a great character with both personality and depth. As far as non-royal units go, Evora is probably the overall best, though there is still one I prefer, and even though she's not as good as my favourite halberdier, she comes in a close second, and that's a pretty impressive achievement all things considered. Okay, I finished talking about Evora without mentioning you know who. Can you please leave me alone now? Man, some people just don't know when to quit.
Hey Ashnod, we have a problem.
What seems to be the matter?
Well, the Laguja are in a state of panic after we captured Lian, Patrina's dead, most of the Daean army has been lost, Ike is still pissed about his dad, and now Crimea is marching towards us along with Benyon, demanding answers for all the shit that's happened.
Don't worry, I know exactly how to get out of this one.
How exactly?
It's simple. We blame Takumi. Man, this guy just cannot catch a break. I mean, aside from being so overly butthurt in Conquest, he becomes the main antagonist, but even in a list where he's one of the best characters, the first thing I do is poke fun at him. Takumi tends to get the short end of the stick very often. Even if he is one of the most joked about Fire Emblem characters, Takumi is still more than capable of holding his own on the battlefield, and is probably one of the most interesting and complex characters in Fates. Takumi is the second youngest of the Hoshido royal family, who first appears at the beginning of the game, but doesn't join the team until chapter 10. Takumi on the surface seems nice enough, and is often shown to be very intelligent and a highly capable warrior, but much like Leo from Nohr, being the second youngest in the family, Takumi suffers from an extreme inferiority complex. Takumi constantly feels that he needs to prove himself to others and be worthy of their praise. As such, he often tries to achieve things on his own, but with that said, Takumi is also very easy to manipulate and often finds it hard to trust anyone from Nohr. What makes Takumi interesting is that despite working towards the same goal, he often views the situation a lot more pessimistically than others and has the most trouble coming to terms with working with Korin. He also has strong supports that help to show Takumi has a more kind-hearted side, as well as addressing his skills and helping him to realise that he is not overshadowed by his siblings and he is more than capable of standing on his own. Gameplay-wise, Takumi is easily one of the best units on your team and the best archer in the game. Aside from the fact that his weapon, the Fujin Yumi, is one of the best weapons in the game, Takumi has great growth rates all around, excelling in skill, HP, speed and strength, as well as being a unit that landed the most criticals on my team. Right from the start, Takumi was an absolute powerhouse and will remain that way right to the end of the game, making him great for offense and especially support attacks. So often I would pair him up with Evora when she was holding down a choke point. His only real flaw is his low resistance, which makes him susceptible to magic attacks, and the fact that magic is now strong against bows doesn't help this. Despite being the ultimate Fire Emblem scapegoat and the proverbial punching bag of fate, Takumi is still one of the best characters in Birthright and probably in Fates as a whole, easily being one of the most interesting and complex characters in the game, as well as being one of the best units and archers in the Fire Emblem series. Is he the best archer? I'm currently on the fence about him being as good as or better than Shilon. I'll have to see what he's like in Revelations to decide. Now I wonder how the Black Knight's getting on. Did the scapegoat work?
Almost. Everyone took the bait and are now up for Takumi's blood. Aside from Ike, he's still royally pissed about his father's death.
Ah, well that's not too bad, right?
I hope not.
Black Knight!
Oh shit, I've got to go. Bye!
Get back here! Fates introduced many new classes to the Fire Emblem series, most of which were from Hoshido, as the Nohr classes were a lot more traditional. Among these classes was the ninja class, who I previously mentioned when talking about Saizo. However, there was one other ninja who was exclusive to Birthright and was another one of Ryoma's retainers. Man, this guy really likes ninjas! As well as being my favourite non-royal unit in Birthright, so ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Kagero. I think it's safe to say that at this point everyone loves ninjas, so being a ninja I knew I was going to like Kagero, but after getting to use her on the battlefield and seeing more of her character, like is an understatement, since I freaking love Kagero, and much like Effie, she's probably one of the best characters in Fates despite not being a royal unit, which is quite the achievement all things considered. Kagero first appears in Chapter 10 of Birthright and joins the team at the end of said chapter. She is also one of Ryoma's retainers alongside Saizo. Kagero to me, in terms of personality, feels like a middle ground between both Saizo and Kaze, as much like Saizo, she focuses most of her efforts on her duty as a retainer and her training, and is overall rather serious and disciplined person. However, she is also willing to take things easy and show appreciation for others when need be, as well as being someone who's willing to chat and be friendly with others if they feel the same way about her. I find this to be one of the more endearing things about Kagero, as I like that despite being focused on her duties, she still has a life and personality outside of it, and her supports reflect this, as she is willing to just talk with and be friends with others, as well as showing that she has an interest in art. Some of my favourite Kagero supports are with Saizo, Ryoma and Korin, and if you were following me on Twitter, you would know that Kagero was my wife in Birthright, which again wasn't an easy choice since I had 8 supports with Hana and Evora as well. I just hope Camilla doesn't get too angry about this, or this isn't going to end well for anyone. Gameplay wise, I found Kagero to be the best of the 3 ninjas and one of the best units on my team, especially when it came to offense and support. Stat wise, Kagero had both very high and very low stats and growth rates, as she has fantastic strength, speed and resistance, but her low HP, defense and luck make her a bit of a glass cannon and not the best unit for every situation or tanking enemies. But with that said, she was a lot more effective than both Saizo and Kaze due to her strength of being able to take down physical units, as well as pretty much destroying all forms of mages. So despite her shortcomings, her strengths make up for that in spades, and she can be disgusting if given the right weapon. At the end of the day, ninjas are awesome and everyone knows this, and while I like all the ninjas in Fates, Kagero is easily my favourite. Well, at least my favourite Birthright exclusive ninja, since Kaze is available on all pathways. Kagero is one of the best units on the battlefield, as well as being one of the strongest characters in Birthright, and feeling much more genuine and down to earth than most of the other characters in Fates, which is why she takes the second place spot of my favourite characters in Birthright, and now all that's left is the number 1 entry. So we've reached the number 1 spot, and now it's time to reveal who my favourite character from Birthright is, and considering who's left to choose from, it should be pretty obvious who would take the number 1 spot, as who is more worthy of claiming the title of the best character in Birthright than the future king of Hoshido, Lord Ryoma. Wow. I mean seriously, wow. The eldest of the Hoshido family wins best Birthright characters, and the eldest of the Nohr family wins best Conquest characters, along with Camilla, but that's not relevant at this point. Now it's going to be interesting to see which of them I find better based on how they are in Revelations. I'm starting to understand how Corin felt during the Branch of Fate. Nevertheless, Ryoma comes in as the number 1 best character in Birthright, as he was easily the best unit on the battlefield and a very interesting and endearing character in his own right, much more than I thought he would be at a first glance. Ryoma is the eldest of the Hoshido royal family and is the next in line to be king after Mikoto fell to the classic anime mother syndrome alongside Trisha Elric and Carly Yeager. Man, I bet heaven is getting flooded with anime moms getting killed at such a young age because of plot reasons. Ryoma, being the eldest of the Hoshido royal family, has a lot of responsibility on his shoulders, and as such, Ryoma is very serious and headstrong much like Xander, as well as being a very powerful warrior. Despite this burden, Ryoma is a very calm and collected person, often having a more laid-back attitude with his comrades and doing his best to uphold Mikoto's values. He also has a lot of charisma that helps to inspire his followers and is willing to look at things from various perspectives in order to see them in a different light. His supports help to show this type of charisma and leadership, since he likes to spend time with each of his teammates and help them out in whatever ways possible. In a sense, Ryoma reminds me of Ike and how he would often talk to his allies between missions. Gameplay wise, Ryoma in the context of Birthright is pretty much a god. I mean seriously, unless he was up against a really powerful foe or someone with a massive advantage against Ryoma, no one could touch him and he would decimate them without trying. Being a swordmaster, Ryoma has very high offensive stats like speed, skill, strength and HP, and while his defense and resistance aren't great, they're not too bad either, making Ryoma a complete package and one of the most well-rounded swordmasters in any Fire Emblem game. Adding to this is that Ryoma's weapon, the Raijinto, or however you pronounce it, is such a ridiculously good weapon that never needs to be swapped out, and his skills Vantage and Astra make Ryoma a deadly force on the battlefield, and a unit that can steamroll pretty much the entirety of Birthright. I mean, most people say he's the best swordmaster in the Fire Emblem series. Personally, I'm on the fence about him like Takumi because of how I feel about Lonku, but I'll wait for Revelations to make a full assessment. And there you have it, Ryoma is my favourite character in Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, being a very interesting and well-written character and the best unit in Birthright. Is he the best character in Fates? I don't know, there's still Revelations to play and the characters that are in all 3 pathways to consider, but at this point he's in the running for taking that title. But remember, he's going up against Xander, Camilla, Takumi, Kagero, Effie and Leo as well. Not to mention the characters I haven't talked about, they're exclusive in all the storylines. But until that time, Ryoma takes the number 1 spot of my favourite character from Fire Emblem Fates Birthright. This has been CRASHX500. I wish you all a great night, take care, and even though I didn't find the Birthright characters to be as strong as the Conquest ones as a whole, I still like them and found them to be a strong addition to the Fire Emblem series. Well now, all that's left is the final pathway of Revelations, and once that's complete, we shall see which character is truly the ocean's grey waves. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to click that like button, and if you'd like to know when more of my videos are coming out, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at CRASHX500. For alternate video recommendations, I first point you to Top 10 Nohr characters, where I count down my favourite characters from Conquest, Top 10 Fire Emblem Awakening characters, where I count down my favourite characters from Awakening, and for something completely different, the first episode of Free For All, where I compare the DS Castlevania games and see which is the best. Hopefully one of those videos will be to your liking. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.